All right, everybody, it is time to talk about everyone's favorite topic, nu metal. I don't know why I said it that way. I feel like the people in this picture look British. According to Loudwire, interest in nu metal is the highest it's been in nearly 20 years, according to Google. A Twitter account named Crazy Ass Moments in Nu Metal History showed a Google Trends graph for the search term nu metal dated from January 1, 2004 until now, and interest is currently at its peak for that time frame. Google only started tracking the trends in January of 2004, so it's unclear what the interest level was prior to that date, but the internet wasn't that advanced back then anyway. So you can see the
breaking news.
I have new merch. I've got this new one designed by my good friend Michael Shantz. It says, "Hell yeah, brother."
Hell yeah, brother.
And the Listen to Nu Metal shirt, as well as all my other designs. And you can check all of those out at the link in the description of this video. So you can see the graph here, courtesy of Crazy Ass Moments in Nu Metal. A lot of up and down here back in 2004, and then a little bit of a bump, and then, starting in 2009 to 2012, 13 or so, really kind of in a valley here for many years. This is the trough of despair for nu metal. That right up until about, 2019, 2020. That's when you see things really started to take off. And then around 2022, last year, that's when it really started to pop off. So some people in the chat here are giving me credit for this. I think this is Finn's fault in bringing nu metal back with his videos 3 or 4 years ago. Listen, I take no responsibility for this if that's true. You remember how the guy who invented the atom bomb, they blew up that island or whatever, and he realized what he had unleashed upon the world, and he said, "Behold, I have become death, destroyer of worlds." And he was like, "Dear God, what have I done?" I feel like that's what I may have done with nu metal. I don't know. In all seriousness, I do not think I'm important enough to have any kind of influence like that. If I did, that'd be cool, but I'm not that important. But I thought it'd be interesting to talk about why this is the case. Because as I have realized, I didn't realize how popular nu metal was when I started making videos about it back in, 2019 or something like that. I mean, I knew people liked nu metal, but I didn't realize how popular it was. And so let's talk about why that is, because I think there's a lot to be learned from that. And also, if there will ever be another movement like this, if there will ever be, I think this is the most popular that rock was, certainly that metal ever was. Will there ever be another moment like nu metal? We'll answer that question later on, but let's talk about what created nu metal in the first place. The first thing, which might seem kind of obvious, but the first thing is, the songs. And there's tons of them, but I would say In the End by Linkin Park is probably, one of the best songs of this era.
It starts with one thing. I don't know why. It doesn't even matter how hard you try.
I've said it before, I'll say it again. I love the graphics. It looks like Morrowind. It's like the Morrowind DLC that never came out. Got to fast travel, buddy. There's nothing in this desert. Hop on that Silt Strider and fast travel out of this shit.
I tried so hard and got
I mean, what a chorus. I love Brad also wearing headphones in the video. Respect. Ear protection at all times. OSHA would be proud of this guy. See, this is the reason whenever I leave the house, I wear eye protection and a helmet and steel-toed shoes. Just like Brad. Safety first. OSHA respects this man.
it doesn't even matter.
But in all seriousness, I mean, this is just a legitimately great song, right? Regardless of genre, this is a crossover song. They played this on rock radio. They played it on mainstream radio. Anybody in any genre could like this song. I use My Barometer as my 40-year-old sister who was born in Vietnam. She knows this song. She knows Chop Suey. She knows all these songs. She doesn't even I don't even think she listens to music, but she likes all this stuff. You think about the songs that were coming out back then. They were just legitimately fucking great songs. Obviously, Break Stuff, Rollin', Freak on a Leash. People remember these songs because they were just that good. Super catchy. They were fun, but they were also real. Especially knowing what happened with Chester, we know that there was some, legitimately real pain and emotion behind these lyrics. It wasn't, unfortunately, it was too real. I think that's something that has really been lost since then. You know, you think about the songs that metal bands have done over the past 10 or 15 years. Are there any songs that, you know, can measure up to these? I don't think so. And, you know, I'm not a new metal stan like a lot of you people are. I mean, I like new metal just fine, but I'm not a new metal stan. I think just legitimately these songs are better than anything else metal has done since then. I just think they are. And not even like, this is a crossover song that's like pretty accessible. It has the piano and stuff too, but like even the heavier songs, like for example, Psychosocial, you know, this song's pretty heavy.
I did my time, and I went out.
So fucking catchy.
The reckoning, the sickening.
This shit's catchy as fuck. Great chorus. I feel like among Slipknot fans, like I think it's not cool to think this is their best song, but whatever. I think it's a 10. I do. It doesn't have the kind of crossover potential that In the End does, obviously, because it's too heavy for that. But my point is that even the heavier side of nu metal, which I would say Slipknot is probably the heaviest of like the big, you know, nu metal bands, even this stuff is just legitimately catchy in a way that, you know, 99% of current metal bands aren't. The only metal bands I would say that are writing stuff that's this catchy now would be, you know, like Bring Me the Horizon, if you can even call them metal these days. And, you know, they're successful, like for obvious reasons, right? So the songs, I think, are maybe the most obvious thing to point to for the success of nu metal. We have to be honest with ourselves. I think metal bands forgot to write songs. Like, people are into riffs now, but riffs are not songs. Yeah, their bands are too technical now. Instead of just having a good time, they're, you know, nerding out about guitar tone and shit like that doesn't actually matter. And this was like, you know, the last time that people tried to actually write fucking songs. Now it's just a bunch of riffs. Or it's these octane bands that are, you know, all the metalcore bands that said, we want to be a big mainstream rock band, are basically trying to emulate this, but it's not good. They're trying to do this, but it's missing the soul that these bands had. And so they're like, okay, we'll write the gent riff and then we'll throw the Linkin Park chorus in it, and that's going to make us popular, right? Well, no, it's not, obviously, because everyone is trying to do it, and none of those bands are breaking through outside of the metal scene. And people are going to say, well, these metalcore bands are playing bigger rooms than ever. Hey, good for them. I'm legitimately happy for them. If there's more bands that can fill a 1,200 cap venue, that's great. But the fact of the matter is that metal now is not nearly as popular as nu metal was in the 2000s, right? They're just not. And I think the songs themselves are a big part of that, but not the only part of it. The other part I would point to is really that it had this kind of like broad appeal that metal doesn't anymore. For example, if you look back to the Family Values tour in 1998, I think they did 3 of them. This is Korn, Rammstein, Ice Cube, Limp Bizkit, and Orgy. Linkin Park had their tour too. I forget the name of that one, but it had this kind of crossover appeal. Partly because of the music, but partly because they also, Project Revolution, that's right, that was Linkin Park's. Part of the reason why it had this big crossover appeal is because these bands wanted to reach outside of the metal scene. You know, they wanted to play with like Ice Cube and, you know, like Limp Bizkit doing the songs with like Method Man. Korn had Snoop Dogg in their video and stuff. You know, you see some of that now with hardcore, you know, for example, like Suicide Boys doing the Grade A tour with Turnstile and City Morgue and stuff like that. You know, you don't see this kind of crossover anymore. It's like metal wants to just tour with metal, play with metal bands, and like that's it, right? Like they don't want anything to do with anything outside of metal. And certainly the fans don't like that. Whenever they try, people don't like it. You know, it just doesn't work. You can't do that anymore. And bands don't want to, which is really unfortunate, because I think the key to, you know, nu metal's success was the fact that it could reach, you know, your sort of stereotypical, like, you know, white trash nu metal kid, right? With the Jankos and the chain necklace and, you know, Mountain Dew, all the sort of like, you know, the stereotypes we have about nu metal kids. It could reach him, but also you're kind of like alternative redneck, you know, those kids that would like go hunting and wear like real tree and stuff, but they were into like Theory of the Dead Man or whatever, you know, kind of Reacher, alternative redneck as well. Oh yeah, there's Jay-Z and Linkin Park. That's right. You know, emo kids like new metal. You know, probably a little bit of crossover with rap as well. You know, someone who's, you know, there's rap fans who maybe had who were a little bit edgier that could listen to something like Limp Bizkit. So it had that kind of broad appeal, and like these bands had interest in getting outside of just the metal scene. And you don't see that anymore. You see this kind of diversity back then, whereas now metal tours is, you know, the headliner plus 7 bands who sound exactly like the headliner. You know what I mean? That's what metal is now. And like, well, no wonder it's all the same fucking dorks that go to these shows, because every one of these bands sound and look exactly the same. The other big factor to talk about is the personalities. You know, like back then, Fred Durst was the biggest star in nu metal, like by far. He was like an actual mainstream celebrity. I mean, you can see here, look, he's got fucking Ben Stiller in his video. You know, you had people like Fred Durst, whether you like him or hate him. Back then, everyone hated him, and now everybody loves him. I think he knew what he was doing. You know, he played the role of like the guy with the red hat that everyone hated. He was happy to play that role, but he was, you know, he was a star. And then he had people, you know, like Jonathan Davis, Slipknot, you know, maybe didn't have necessarily huge personalities because they sort of by design tried, you know, they wore the masks and stuff to like hide who they really were, but the masks, right? Huge. You know, Marilyn Manson, if you want to include him in nu metal, which I guess I probably would. Huge personality. And again, whether you like Marilyn Manson or not, you know, whether you think he's a creep or a scumbag, that's neither here nor there. The fact of the matter is he was a huge personality. You know, we don't have any stars anymore in metal. We just don't. And you saw after this, emo was probably the last big thing. And you had people like Hayley Williams and Pete Wentz who were also big stars. And these days, yeah, exactly. Wes Borland from Limp Bizkit, you know, he had a big personality, like a big larger than life personality. We don't have that anymore. Like you look at it now, any of these metalcore bands, like a modern metalcore band, they all look the fucking same. And I'm not going to like single anyone out, but like they could all be the same. Look at this. Like just a bunch of like generic white guys in black shirts standing in a room. Nothing about them looks even remotely interesting. Every fucking band looks the same, and none of them are like remarkable in any way. You know what I mean? Whereas, I mean, say what you want about it, I wouldn't necessarily suggest that anybody look like this now, but you look at this, it fucking stands out. You know what I mean? It stands out compared to every fucking metalcore band that now looks exactly the fucking same. Yeah, Mudvayne, great example of it. Mudvayne, like I think Mudvayne's pretty corny, but you can't miss them. Right? I mean, they look like video game characters or WWE wrestlers or something. Remember, like the job is to entertain people. Static X, that's another one. The job is to entertain people. The job is not to like, I don't know. I feel like they're trying I feel like they almost don't want to look interesting or cool. You know what I mean? It's like metal bands now almost like want to go out of their way to look uninteresting and boring and bland. And MGK was right about the comfy shoes thing. He was right. They take themselves so seriously now, and nobody wants to stand out. They want to do the opposite of stand out. No wonder people don't give a shit about your band. You're not giving them a show. That is your job at the end of the day, is to give them a show. We need big personalities. We need larger than life characters. Like, that's what we need. Like, why do you think MGK is popular? You know, because he is a larger than life character. You know, he looks like a weirdo. He wears pink all the time. Love him or hate him, the fact of the matter is he knows how to get your attention. We don't have that anymore. Nu metal was the last time that metal had characters like that had an interesting personality and that had like a, you know, larger than life presence. We don't have that anymore. You know, actually Ghost is a good example. And Ghost, look, Ghost is a very big band. Ghost is probably the biggest breakthrough band of the last 10 years. And look at them. They put on a show. They are interesting. Ronnie Radke, yes. Ronnie Radke, great example. And look at Ronnie's success. Ronnie is selling out arenas right now. Ronnie is on tour right now selling out arenas, and he has a huge personality. Where are the other big personalities in rock? Like they don't exist anymore. Everyone is bland and boring. They're afraid to take any chances. The last thing I would talk about that does not really exist anymore is the media ecosystem that supported all of this. I talked about this recently, like, you know, as far as the monoculture, you know, I've talked about TRL a million times, but like I keep bringing it up because MTV was just so important back then. So you had MTV, Fuse, Much Music, you know, 3 or 4 media channels that mattered. You know, there was like Spin and Rolling Stone and Kerrang. There was probably like, I don't know, half a dozen magazines back then that actually mattered. And they promoted the shit out of this stuff. You know, Korn was on TRL all the time. Like, I think Korn had something, they had something like 8 songs or something on TRL. They named the number 3 spot, you know, the Korn spot, because they would always end up in the number 3 spot and then get beat by Backstreet Boys or NSYNC. But the point is, like, that they were on the level where NSYNC and Backstreet Boys were the ones who were beating them. You know, think about that. Like, that'd be like a band now losing to Bad Bunny or BTS, you know? Like, if a metal band was at the level where they were competing with Bad Bunny or Post Malone, like, that's what nu metal was back in the 2000s. Yeah, and sometimes they did actually win. Another good example of that, like, to me, like a huge moment for the culture of nu metal, when Fred Durst did a song with Christina Aguilera at the 2000 VMAs. His cargo shorts and Osiris D3s with Prime X Tina. The microphone rocking in my soul. And you know, Christina Aguilera at that time was just a fucking huge star. Huge star. This would be the equivalent of a metal band now doing something with, like, I don't know, Lizzo or Ariana Grande. You know what I mean? Imagine a metal band doing an appearance like this with Ariana Grande. That's how big she was back then. And Fred Durst was a, like, pop culture star. And they had the stage of, like, MTV to elevate them. You put all these things together. It's the songs, it's the personalities and the image. It's this, like, interest in going outside just the kind of insular world of metal with things like the Family Values Tour and having the media ecosystem of MTV and whatnot to prop it up. I think that is why nu metal was as popular as it was. So, you know, you wonder, is there going to be another nu metal? And I don't think there can be. You know, it's a different time. I think especially, I talked about this before, but the death of the monoculture is a big part of it. Yeah, metal has no personality now except when it's a bad one like Ronnie or MGK. Well, remember, everybody hated Fred Durst back then. You know, all the metal people hated Fred Durst. They hate you. You know, basically, that's how it always works. They hate you when you're making noise and when you're bringing eyeballs on the genre. And then 20 years later, you know, they changed their tune and they realize, actually, maybe you weren't so bad after all. But yeah, Fred Durst was fucking absolutely despised back then. I kind of think that, you know, metal got what it wanted. Like, think about how much shit people talked about metal back in the day, and people kind of listened and they're like, all right, fine. You know, we're not going to dress crazy. And we're not going to act like big personalities, and we're not going to go on tour with rappers, and we're not going to go on MTV because they were so afraid of, you know, pissing off whatever the metal nerds, you know, that now the culture of metal is such that it can't create stars because all the things about metal that made nu metal popular are gone now. You know, like, there's no ideas anymore. So now all this kind of energy that would have gone into nu metal bands back then, now those people are rappers. You know, that's how it's working. So all the big personalities are becoming rappers, and, you know, the monoculture is gone. So the best you can hope for now is to get big on TikTok, and they're doing great. Don't get me wrong. I mean, there's bands like Ice Nine Kills and whatnot that are playing like arena shows. Yeah, Bad Omens, Spirit Box. Those bands are doing great for sure. But they're not nearly as big as, I mean, look, this is fucking TRL. Like, there are 0 metal bands in the actual mainstream now. And I don't think that's ever going to change. I think it's just a different time. You know, I think that nu metal was just a perfect storm of things that can't exist anymore. And, you know, I think nu metal is it. And so I think that's why the interest in nu metal is higher than ever. And I think nu metal is always going to be the peak of metal. I think that's it. New metal, who knew? Who knew at the time that this right here, that white guys with dreads playing their bass like this, that was the peak of metal, people. That's it. It's all downhill from there. That's what I think.